In the sweltering summer of 1776, 56 men gathered in Philadelphia's Independence Hall, representing all 13 colonies. The air was thick with heat and anticipation, as these delegates, each carrying the hopes and fears of their home colonies, prepared to make decisions that would echo through history. They were lawyers, merchants, doctors, and farmers, men with much to lose. Many had families waiting anxiously at home, businesses and farms that could be destroyed in an instant if their cause failed. They were ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. Locked away from the outside world, they debated a decision that could cost them their lives, defying King George III. The doors were closed, the windows shuttered, and secrecy was paramount, for the consequences of discovery were dire. If they failed, they'd be hunted as traitors, their families disgraced, their property seized. The threat of British retribution loomed over every conversation, every vote, every whispered word, yet day after day they argued, driven by a growing conviction that they could no longer live under a distant king who taxed and controlled them without consent. The debates were fierce, tempers flared and alliances shifted, but the idea of freedom began to unite them. John Adams pushed relentlessly for independence, believing it was the only path forward. John Dickinson urged caution, fearing the chaos that might follow. Benjamin Franklin, ever the diplomat, sought unity and compromise, hoping to keep the fragile coalition together. The room was divided, but the idea of a new nation, one where people governed themselves, began to take hold. Slowly, through passionate debate and heartfelt persuasion, consensus started to form. The world had never seen anything like it. The notion that ordinary citizens could shape their own destiny was radical, even dangerous, and it sent shockwaves across the globe. The risk was enormous, but so was the hope. Each man knew he was standing at the edge of history, and the promise of liberty was worth every danger they faced. The war had already begun, but now, these men were contemplating something even more radical: the birth of a nation founded on liberty. The world was watching, waiting to see if these colonies could truly break free and create something new, and history was about to change. In that room, against all odds, the foundation of a new nation was being laid, one that would inspire generations to come. The path to independence was paved with frustration and hope, as ordinary colonists found themselves caught between loyalty to their homeland and the growing weight of injustice. After the costly French and Indian War, Britain taxed the colonies to pay its debts, without giving them a voice in Parliament. The colonists, who had fought alongside the British, now felt betrayed by the very government they had supported. No taxation without representation became the rallying cry, echoing through town meetings, pamphlets, and protests across the colonies. Acts like the Stamp Act and Townshend Acts placed new burdens on daily life, taxing everything from newspapers to tea, and fueling resentment with every new decree. These laws sparked boycotts and protests, sometimes turning violent, as in the Boston Massacre, where blood was spilled on colonial streets and tensions reached a boiling point. The Boston Tea Party sent a clear message: the colonists would not be bullied or forced to accept unfair rule. In a single night, chests of tea were tossed into the harbor, and the world took notice. Britain responded with the intolerable acts, shutting down Boston's port and stripping local power, hoping to crush the spirit of resistance. Instead, these harsh measures only united the colonies further. Forced to house British soldiers, many colonists saw this as the final straw, a violation of their homes and their rights, deepening their anger and resolve. Petitions to the king were met with punishment, not compromise. Each plea for fairness was ignored or rejected, leaving colonists feeling powerless and unheard. The colonists realized they couldn't be both free and subjects of King George. The dream of liberty began to outweigh the fear of rebellion. The idea of independence, once unthinkable, became a determined shout. Debates grew more passionate, and leaders emerged, ready to risk everything for a new future. The relationship with Britain was broken, trust shattered, and the colonies stood at a crossroads. The time for peaceful solutions had passed. The colonies now faced a choice that would shape history. The colonies were ready to choose liberty, forging a new identity and a new nation, no matter the cost. When Congress decided to declare independence, they turned to Thomas Jefferson, a 33-year-old Virginian known for his eloquence. Drawing on Enlightenment thinkers like John Locke, Jefferson wrote of natural rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. He worked for days, crafting a document that would become America's birth certificate. Adams and Franklin made key edits, including Franklin's famous change to self-evident truths. Every word mattered. This was a message to the world. The draft was debated and revised by Congress, sometimes painfully for Jefferson. But the process ensured the Declaration spoke for all the colonies. It was not just Jefferson's work. It was the collective voice of a new nation. The final draft was ready for a vote. The stakes could not have been higher. The world would soon hear their case for freedom. The Declaration's opening lines are among history's most powerful. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. It declared that governments exist to protect rights and get their power from the people. If a government fails, the people have the right to change it. This was a radical rejection of monarchy and a call for revolution. The document listed King George's abuses, showing independence was a last resort. It aimed to inspire Americans, persuade allies, and send a final message to Britain. The colonies were now free and independent states. The world had been put on notice. The vote for independence was far from unanimous. Delegates were divided. Some feared war, others doubted unity. On July 1st, John Dickinson argued against independence. John Adams responded with passion, urging action. The first vote failed. Pennsylvania and South Carolina said no. Delaware was split. New York abstained. But overnight, supporters worked tirelessly to sway the undecided. Caesar Rodney rode through a storm to break Delaware's tie. South Carolina changed its vote for unity. Pennsylvania's opposition stayed home. On July 2nd, 12 colonies voted yes. New York soon followed. The decision was made. America would declare independence. The next days were spent editing Jefferson's text. On July 4th, 1776, the Declaration was adopted. The colonies had chosen their fate. There was no turning back. July 4th saw the Declaration approved, but the famous signed copy came later. On August 2nd, most delegates gathered to sign the parchment, fully aware they were committing treason. John Hancock's bold signature became legendary. Franklin quipped, "We must all hang together, or most assuredly we shall all hang separately." The 56 signers were diverse, young and old, wealthy and self-made, but united by the cause of liberty. Many paid dearly, homes destroyed, fortunes lost, families uprooted. Some, like Richard Stockton, suffered imprisonment and ruin. Their pledge, our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor, was no empty promise. These were real people, risking everything. Their signatures were a bond of courage. The cost of freedom was personal and profound. Their sacrifice gave the Declaration its true meaning. The world would remember their stand. Once adopted, the Declaration was rushed to every colony. It was read aloud in town squares to Washington's troops and in cities from Boston to Savannah. Celebrations erupted, bells rang, bonfires blazed, statues of the king toppled. Americans began to see themselves as one people. But not all rejoiced. Loyalists saw the Declaration as betrayal, and the war became a bitter civil conflict. The stakes changed. Now, Americans fought not for rights within the empire but for survival as a nation. For Britain it was a rebellion to crush. For Americans, it was all or nothing. The Declaration forced everyone to choose a side. The words on paper demanded action on the battlefield. The fight for independence had truly begun. There was no going back. The world was watching America's gamble. The Declaration was just the beginning. Now came the fight to make it real. The British Army was the world's strongest. Washington's troops were outmatched and undersupplied. Early defeats nearly crushed the cause, but Washington's surprise victory at Trenton revived hope. The war dragged on for 8 brutal years. Valley Forge, Saratoga, Yorktown. American perseverance and crucial help from France turned the tide. The conflict became global, with Britain fighting on many fronts. At Yorktown, American and French forces forced a British surrender. The gamble of independence had paid off. The ideals of the Declaration were secured not just by words, but by sacrifice. The United States had won its freedom. The world saw that ordinary people could defy an empire. The Revolution's promise was now a reality. The experiment in liberty had begun. Independence was just the start. The new nation faced the challenge of living up to its ideals. The founding generation had declared a bold vision, but turning those words into reality would prove far more difficult. The world watched as America attempted something unprecedented, a government built on the principles of liberty and equality. All men are created equal was a promise not yet fulfilled. Slavery persisted, and many were excluded from rights. Women, indigenous peoples, and countless others were denied a voice in the new democracy. The contradiction between the nation's ideals and its practices was stark and painful. The struggle to close the gap between ideals and reality would define America's future. Generation after generation, people rose up to demand that the nation live up to its founding words. Protests, debates, and movements became the heartbeat of American progress. Yet the Declaration's words inspired abolitionists, suffragists, and civil rights leaders. Its message gave hope to those fighting for freedom and justice, fueling campaigns to end slavery, win the vote for women, and secure civil rights for all. Its message echoed far beyond America, fueling revolutions and independence movements worldwide. The idea that people could claim their rights and demand change became a rallying cry for oppressed peoples everywhere. The French Revolution, Latin American uprisings, and countless others drew strength from Jefferson's words. Leaders and revolutionaries across continents looked to the American example as proof that ordinary people could challenge empires and kings. The idea that people could choose their own destiny became a global force. It inspired new constitutions, new nations, and a new sense of what was possible for humanity. The decision made in Philadelphia was a turning point in history. It marked the birth of a nation and the beginning of a global movement for self-government. It launched an experiment in self-government and liberty. The world had never seen a nation founded on such ideals, and the outcome was uncertain. The Declaration asserted that ordinary people could do extraordinary things. It challenged the old order and empowered citizens to shape their own future. It changed not just America, but the world. The principles of 1776 became a beacon for those seeking freedom and dignity everywhere. The work of making its promises real continues. Each generation is called to renew the commitment to equality and justice, to ensure that the legacy of the Declaration lives on. The legacy of 1776 endures, an idea that still shapes the world, reminding us that the pursuit of liberty and equality is a journey, not a destination.